You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois on April 30th, 2023, Sunday, around 3 p.m. And we expect today to play our 18th and final turn of The Case of the Blinded Birder, a game by MurdersByMail.com, a play-by-mail game, which this company makes 3 of, and this is the third one we've played, the final one. And it's with real bittersweet emotion that I'm greeting this playthrough, because it's been a big surprise that this case, this setting in this UK countryside, quiet town, cozy mystery set in Bockerley, has turned out to be the most compelling. Which is really, you can see how unexpected that is for me, because I didn't intend to play this one. We played the first 2. I recorded a video review on YouTube, a spoiler-free review of the system, of this play-by-mail system. Concluded various things. I mean, there was a lot I liked. There were some things that didn't pan out. And then we thought, all right, we'll play this one. That was enjoyable enough. We'll try this one that I expect to be not so good. And we've been surprised. It's felt like the most compelling. Maybe we'll talk about the experience when we're finished with it. Our plan today, however, is to submit our solutions. We've been ready for a month or so, but we've been reluctant to lead this town. We're chasing down some last leads. So I have our reply for today. And I think probably what we should do is we should read it, because there's a chance, a small chance, that we'll read something here that compels us to keep going. So let me check in with the chat, make sure everything's working here. And Tina is commenting about the little live webcam. It's a webcam pointed at a place in town, a university statue. So what I think we'll do is we'll look at this reply, and this is your last chance. I know most of you are ready for this game to end. I'm not so sure, but I could be convinced to keep going for another week or 2. There are a bunch of places here that we could send people just for fun, but it does feel like long ago we've solved this case, and maybe we're tempting the gods by leaving our criminals on the loose for so long. One could get away. The game has threatened from the beginning, from all the cases in this series, has threatened that if you don't act quickly, someone could get away, but we've never seen any indication that that could happen. So we'll read this reply, and then we'll take our time, we'll talk about, we'll make sure we really want to solve it. And if so, we'll read the questions and we'll go solve it today. That's our plan. All right. Any more bookkeeping, though, before we get started? Obviously, if you've stumbled onto this video and haven't watched the previous 17 turns, you should stop, go back, watch those first. Or if you think you might play this yourself, you can buy it for $40. So that includes all the replies you might get out of it over the coming months. And then you can watch this when you're done. I should remind us that the way these games work is when we solve them, we get a little epilogue story online as we solve it online. And then in a week or 2, we'll actually get another letter, probably from Cecily, the leader of this little group, just giving us a little follow-up information. So there'll be one more video after we solve it, sharing the letter, the finale, the postscript letter. All right, what else is there to talk about? A reminder that at 4:30, which is an hour and 20 minutes or so from now, we'll be playing the Dear Holmes third letter, which is a new play-by-mail, not really a game per se, but mysteries that we're trying to solve. That's turned out to be pretty compelling. When we finish these Case of the Blinded Birder, which has been at 3 p.m., the Dear Homes will fall into this 3 p.m. slot. Maybe even I'm willing to push it up to 2 p.m. if everyone's interested. So we'll be back to playing one game every Sunday for about an hour. It won't be at 4:30. It'll be at the latest at 3 p.m., but possibly at 2 p.m. Let me know what works best for you. And the place to let me know is the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel, which you can find a link to on the About page. In that little guild, that little forum section of Board Game Geek, we talk about and plan what games to play next and try to arrange whatever scheduling we can do. And it's a good time to remind you about that forum section, because another thing that's happening on that forum section is that someone else who's played these cases has been posting a comparison of their playthrough to our playthrough. And one of the questions we always had was, what if you send a different person to the same given place? How different is the reply? And he's been updating that thread from the Bloom of Hollywood case and letting us know where things change. And it's interesting to see. And I suspect we'll follow up that with this case. I think this makes a great gift. I sent it to my mother, who's now playing through it. So eventually, if you're a fan of this case and of the people involved, Cecily and the vicar and Imogene, we will be posting follow-ups on that in that section about how different people may have gotten different information. And if you played this case yourself and have stumbled onto these videos, I'd love it if you stopped by and gave us your thoughts on the case and what you encountered differently, or you could post a comment on this video. Lastly, what other thing, before we jump into this, the other thing is I've been so compelled by these play-by-mail format, this sort of slow, casual, take your time playthrough, that I've started to think whether I should consider my detective game being sort of a play-by-mail format. So if you have any interest in talking about these kinds of game design issues and how one might expand on this play-by-mail system, what experimental things you might try, stop by the Board Game Geek Guild for the channel and look for the high and low thread, game design thread, and I've just finished writing up the intro to my case, and I'll be sharing that soon. Maybe you guys can give me some comments on that. All right. Noah says, I haven't been watching this series, but I'll check out the finale. It's not going to make any sense to just watch the finale without the previous 18 turns, but as you will. All right, let's take a look at where let's remind ourselves where we sent people today. So we sent Cecily to Sable Drug. Why did we send Cecily to Sable Drug? Because in the first newspaper of the game, the only newspaper of the game, we hear about the George Sable from Sable Drug having his broadcast interfered with, and a suggestion that it might be coming from the RAF Air Force Base. George Sable, proprietor of Sable Drug Store, was one of the affected. We always play the program at the store. We're the only local source of the delightful Lucozade sucrose drink. I'm sad to say the music was just ruined. Well, it was clearly never related to our case, but we did recently go to the RAF, and he's saying, we don't do radar work. We wouldn't do anything that would interfere. Maybe George Sable is drinking something. So we thought, all right, let's wrap up this little case. Even though we know there's no question about it, I am still a little curious what George Sable has to say for himself. Then we sent Imogen to one of the last friends that we have, informers, contacts at the side of the book, Cecily's contacts. So there's two we haven't been to yet. One is the Historical Society and one is the Library Stacks. Looks like we're going to end this game without ever going to the Library Stacks. This may be the first Sherlock Holmes style game I've ever played where I haven't been to all the informants. Just something to keep in mind if you want to make the case that we should keep going. But we did send Imogen to the Historical Society to see if she has any more clues. Probably just all stuff we know. And then the vicar, the one we always, our main thinking with the vicar is, let's keep him out of trouble. So where did we send him? We sent him to the Jolly Run Freight Yard. And the reason we sent him there is there's this little side case about this box of birds. We think we understand the whole thing. We think this was a fly fisherman's birds and that they moved town and that this moving packing box got lost in transport. And it was a Jolly Run transport box. So maybe we're going to wrap that up and hear that they know about a box was lost. Maybe the claim was filed. Maybe we're going to help them realize that we found their box. All right, anything else in the chat to talk about before I start? No. All right, here we go, Cecily. Where's my, what do I need for this? All right, Cecily has gone to George Sable at Sable Drug. Dearest Jessie, George Sable greeted me as soon as I entered his drugstore. Portly, but with boundless energy, he insisted that I take a seat at the counter. Cecily Miller, I must say it's a pleasure, nay, a truest pleasure, to have someone of your stature grace my store. If I had an elegance meter over the door, it'd be straight past the maximum. Now, what can I get you? If it's anything short of my immortal soul, it's yours. I smiled at my host. Perhaps one of those Lucasade drinks you were speaking of in the paper, I said. Sable snapped his fingers and busied himself with the spouts and glasses behind the counter. A moment later, a fizzy drink that smelled of lemons was under my nose, and he watched in excitement as I took my first sip. Oh, it's delightful, I lied. He laughed. Of course it is. Now, what really brought you to my humble store? I told him about our inquiries into the death of Rupert Albright. He shrugged. Yes, I met the man once or twice at the radio shop. I'd taken our unit there to have Mr. Clark see if anything was wrong with it. We'd lost our signal a few times. Clark and Albright poked around its guts together. The way they talked, I rather got the impression that Albright had been reading up on radio construction. He knew quite a bit, but neither of them had any idea what was wrong. I thought your radio trouble was the fault of the airfield. He winked at me. Well, between you and me, Mum, I made that up. You see, the Lucasade rep was visiting the store that night, and he was quite upset that the program they'd sponsored wasn't coming through clearly. Just then I heard an airplane buzzing over, and in a moment of inspiration, I blamed the whole mess on the Air Force. The rumor spread, and the next thing I knew, I was being interviewed by the paper. So I made lemons into Lucasade, as they say. I don't think they say that, I said. Well, maybe now they will, he said, but I'm sorry, that's all I know about Albright. If I hear anything else, I'll let you know. All right, so we've wrapped up that little mystery. He made it up to sell some Lucasade or to ameliorate the damage done to the Lucasade salesman. Classic case of a businessman making up little white lies to improve his business. All right, that's that wrapped up. Now here's Imogen going to the Historical Society. Dear Jessie, the Bockerley Historical Society is a musty warren of shelves and display cases. Documents, books, and old photos compete for every surface. In the center of the maelstrom, Wooster and I found the Society's longtime organizer, Agnes. As soon as we saw her, Wooster barked in excitement and ran to her ankles, giving them an enthusiastic licking. Agnes hooted in laughter. Wooster, you're a cad. She scooped him up into her arms and gave him a hug. Lady Bickford Smithy, so lovely to see you and Wooster. What brings you round today? Well, I brought her up to speed on our latest investigation. "Oh, Rupert Albright," she said. "That does ring a bell. Oh, yeah. I was just labeling a photograph with that name. Here, let me find it." She led me into the stacks and pulled out a substantial leather folio labeled Churchill Businesses. Pages were tabbed by year, each covered in photos labeled in Agnes's neat black block printing. She flipped to 1942 and pointed at a picture with two men posing in front of a Bockerley storefront. "Oh, here it is," said Agnes, and she read the caption aloud. "1st October 1942. Jason Longhurst and his lead salesman, Rupert Albright, opening the new location for Longhurst Carpet and Rug." I leaned in and studied the photo. Mr. Longhurst was a jolly expanse of a man, beaming and embarrassed. Albright stared into the lens with a confident, almost smug look on his face. He was more conventionally handsome than the picture I'd constructed in my mind, and yet at the same time I found him wholly unappealing. Agnes saw my reaction. "Well, photos can give such an impression of a man." "Indeed, he strikes me as rather arrogant. You?" "Well, I was going to say awful," said Agnes, "but maybe that's because of what Mr. Longhurst told me." Agnes tapped the photo. "When I was researching this photo, I went to the carpet store and I asked Longhurst to help me with the names. He took one glance and muttered something like, 'I wish we'd a photo without that dreadful man in it.' Of course, I asked him what Albright had done, and he said something like, 'I really shouldn't elaborate, but not long after our opening, his behavior forced me to let him go.'" That's Lady Imogen Bickford Smithy. All right, so just another way to point you towards the carpet store, who Roberto Canagar, who's in the channel now, already sent us to, of his own intuition, against my better judgment, but it turned out that was useful because we do have an end question about that. All right, here's our last entry in this letter, the Vicar's report, and I always note how the Vicar, in his real stylistic way, always gives a title to each report. And this report he's titled Shipping and Birds. Jolly Run is arguably the most well-known business in Bockerley. Its bright green lorries with their yellow lettering can be seen on the roads all through England. The company employs a great many laborers and drivers who'll move most anything safely across the country for a price, or so I've been told. These rough men gave me quite a look as I made my way through the busy loading yard and into the office. A bald man with rounded shoulders hunched at the reception desk, muttering to himself as he summoned a column of tightly written numbers under the hovering tip of a knife-cut pencil. Without taking his eyes from his work, he held up one finger, halting me in my tracks. He looked to the ceiling, lips moving. He seemed to come to a conclusion, then bobbed his head up and down. "Done," he said. He made a note on his paper, then looked my way. "Sorry, Vicar, you caught me in the middle of payables. Desk girl got married. She's on honeymoon, so the maths fall to me for a few days. God help us all." "Could I possibly speak to the manager?" "Well, you already are. I'm Johnny Jolly. Church needs something moved?" I told him about our investigation and mentioned the box in the newspaper that the strange birds were found within. "Ah, yes, that would have been one of our residential boxes. We don't print our name on the commercial ones. Business clients want their own lettering on the things or nothing at all. But I don't know up from down with this murder you're talking about. You think they're related somehow? Dead birds and dead birders?" I decided that I liked this gruff man. "Well, the themes overlap, if nothing else." "Righto." He spun around in his chair and rifled through a filing cabinet, then snapped a paper form in the air. "Newspaper said the box was by the railroad. Let's assume it fell off a train, shall we? There was only one residential job we sent by rail that week." He donned reading glasses and studied the page. "Mr. Carl Papes, relocating to Brighton for new employment. He wouldn't be at home anymore, of course, but you might speak to my pack-out lad, Peter Palma. Surprising what you notice when you pack up a place." Is Mr. Palma here now? I asked. Perhaps I could talk to him today. Johnny Jolly guffawed. Sorry, he's honeymooning too, with my desk girl. He winked at me. Lovebirds are supposed to be back from their trip tonight. Something tells me you can catch them recovering at home. All right, so if for some reason we wanted to talk to the pack-out kid about these birds, we could, but really we don't. We know the entire story. The person who was moving had lots of these dead birds. He was using their feathers for fly fishing. The only reason we were chasing it down is we thought, well, maybe this guy, Pape, the fly fisher, would want to know that we found his old birds. Maybe they were his favorite feathers. But talking to the packing kid doesn't seem like it would be very useful. It's funny, the packing kid and the desk girl are the ones that got married together. All right, so it's a shame, though, that we're not going to get another report from the vicar. So those are our 3 letters. Nothing new brought to mind. Nothing new that compels us to go visit, although obviously there is a new lead. We could go visit that guy at his home. He's going to be in the directory. It's not really our business to knock on their door of their just married couple. That seems a little rude. So it feels to me like we're just about done here. Although, honestly, if I could get 3 more replies from the vicar, I'd be very curious to send him off to the different churches in town just to see what he says. Because we've seen some run-ins he had with the other churches. When he talks about the true church, he gets a little testy with them. Let's look in the chat. When the Army denied involvement, I was quite sure there's something in the story. Yeah, Army denied it, and it turns out the Army was telling the truth. It is interesting to hear the Jolly Transport Company actually confirmed our thought. We tracked down, if you'll remember, Pape's house and where he was moving to, which was somewhere maybe out towards Brighton, and we concluded, and then where the box was found, and we actually concluded, wouldn't it be likely if the moving box was on a train and fell off? And the nice thing is, from this last lead, he seems to be confirming that that's exactly what he thinks happened as well. So that was kind of fun. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a little vote now about whether we should wrap up the case and answer it. So here we go. I want you to type vote finish or vote keep going. And my vote is going to be for we finish. I think it's appropriate that we finish here, but I'm willing to see what the channel says. Four votes for finish. If you include mine, that's 5. Okay, that's 5 votes finish. Rob says, let's not overstay our welcome. It's true. The main reason not to finish is because with many of these things, there's a diminishing return. And I do worry that our fond memories of this place will start to get diluted as we spend more time not getting new information. Okay, so it looks like we're going to finish here. Roberto says, although I'm sad. Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel like it's the right time to finish. I'm glad we took our extra turns, but I am sad that we're going to be leaving. Okay, so here we go. Let's take a look. So this was letter 17. So 17 letters with 1 letter a month is about 4 months, a little over 4 months. We've been playing this together. All right, let's just remind ourselves. There's Cecily, there's Imogen, Bickford Smithy with her dog Wooster. There's the vicar, who, remember, he got his head hit in, almost died. All right, and here's our questions, and we're going to talk about these a little more. We've talked about them before. We're just going to review them and talk about the one question that we're still a little nervous about. So let's take a look at this together. Primary questions. Who killed Rupert Albright? Rupert Albright. All right, we know the answer to that one. That's Kathleen Carwood, the woman professor who runs the dig, who was planting fake artifacts to keep her research going. And we know that Rupert Albright spotted her from a cave or somewhere while he was out looking at bats after having moved on for birds, and blackmailed her. He has some experience in blackmailing. We know he blackmailed a woman at the carpet shop, and he blackmailed her. She paid him once by giving him an old vase, and he sold it at the auction, and then he told her she needed to pay more. They organized a meeting to be paid off near Heller Hole here in Borley Wood. He said, "I'll be watching to make sure you come alone." We know she drove up, parked her car somewhere in Borley Wood. He was looking for her with his glasses, and she shot him with a small caliber pistol right in the eye, right through his glasses. We know she's a top shot and has been practicing recently. We know she was spotted driving off alone. So there's our core of our case. Okay, so we know it's Kathleen Carwood. We know the motive was, what do you call the motive when you kill the blackmailer? I don't think there's an official criminal penal term for that. But murder with extenuating circumstances if someone's blackmailing you, but she's killing the blackmailer. I suppose you could say she's killing to cover up so her fraudulent activity doesn't come out. Now, question 3 is our one question that's really given us pause here. Because the question is, what location should the police visit to catch the killer? All right, so we're going to have to name a location on the map. And we've got, let's say, 3 choices, 3 thematic choices. Choice 1 is at the dig. That seems the place where she's most likely actually at currently. There's a couple reasons we think that that's where she is. First of all, we've been to her home, and her description of her home is that she seems to spend no time at home. She's always at the dig. We've already seen her once at the dig. That's where she works. That's where she spends her whole life. And recently, when we talked to her best friend, who's sort of an accomplice after the fact, the shovel woman was like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go to the dig. So we know she's probably meeting up with Kathleen at the dig. So all of our best guess is that that is the location Kathleen Carwood is at, assuming that she hasn't tried to fly the coop. Assuming that she doesn't think the police are onto her and she's escaped town. But we can't go back there to verify that she's there. But that's the only other place we know she hangs out. However, the other place we could go if we wanted to have the police figure out it's her, find proof that it's her, that would be her home. Why is that? Because we went to her home and we found in a closet the gun that we believe is the murder weapon and a note in the trash from Rupert Albright agreeing to meet up at this place. So if we wanted to pick a place where she's not going to be, but where the best evidence against her is, we would send it to Kathleen Carwood's home. And then the third possible location, which we don't know of where this would be, but one might at least consider it, is maybe the location where she would go to run away or hide. Probably that would be, if we had to guess, if we were forced to guess, it would be this third friend, this third woman who works the dig that we haven't met yet. But probably that's not gonna, that we don't think there's any way we could find that. It doesn't seem like she's going to the shovel digger's house, and we were there. So probably just those 2 to choose from. if I had to, as a meta commentary on the way this game was made, if I had to guess, I would guess that probably either of those two answers are going to lead to success. That's my guess. I don't know if everyone's going to agree with me. But I wouldn't be surprised that if you pick either of those two answers, the dig or her house, you get a different ending, but still a success ending. But we're going to vote on that as a group, where what you want to pick as the final location. What location, let's read the wording carefully. What location should the police visit to catch the killer? It's a little ambiguous. Although it does seem to suggest, like, it doesn't say what location should they go to apprehend the killer or to lay hands on the killer. It says catch, which is a little ambiguous because it might suggest that it's asking where should they go to get the information they need to figure out the killer. If it said where should they go to figure out, to convince them who the killer was, we'd know how to send them there. The way it's phrased makes me think we should go to the location we think she's at. So if I had to choose, I'd probably choose the dig. But that rubs me a little bit the wrong way, since it seems the house is the most important. All right, let's vote on this. Do you want to go to Kathleen's house or the dig? So just say vote house or vote dig. Rob points out the question makes it sound like she's in hiding, but nothing we've read indicates that. Emmy says the question is framed to me like she's hiding. Rob agrees. The question makes it sound like she's in hiding. Debbie says, it's just asking us where she can be found. So Debbie sounds like Debbie's confident it should be at the dig site. Nicholas says dig site. Debbie says dig site. Rob says dig site. Roberto says vote the dig site. And Tina says, the only thing is if she went somewhere else after killing the guard. Yeah, that's troubling because we never found the proper way to find the information about George Wendt's body being discovered. So you could imagine a world where there's a place we're supposed to stumble where we find evidence about who dumped the body, and Kathleen Carwood's... I mean, the shovel-wielding woman, you could imagine, could be trying to cover up for Kathleen. But we actually got pretty good confirmation that Kathleen was the one who killed George Wendt, the security guard, because we're told it was a fairly stunning, tall, blonde woman. And that's all Kathleen Carwood. So, and then when we talked to Susan, the shovel wielder, Cecily, who's good at reading people, said she didn't notice anything real fear for her own safety, just protecting. So I don't think Susan, the shovel wielder, is actually involved in this. All right, it sounds like everyone's involved. Everyone's choosing dig. Roberto says, when we visited Janet Rosso, I had the feeling that they were more intimate than collaborators. So did I, but it did say they were best friends, and Cecily did say she did not detect any fear in Susan of getting caught for doing something wrong, something like that. So she could be hiding her if we had some clue that someone else was in the house, in Susan's house, but we don't, right? I mean, I'm fairly certain. I know that Susan, I did think, like, what if when we talked to Susan, to make sure we didn't get a glimpse of her car outside the door. Trying to remember where we last talked to Susan. And remember, we haven't talked to any of the poachers. We're certain that she's not there. We're certain that the poachers aren't involved, so we didn't bother. The only place I could imagine is that Cecily would be hiding in Susan's house. And we had not seen any clue about that. But you could imagine that there was some clue we missed about the car being parked outside Susan's house. Janet Rosso. Here's the letter with Janet Rosso, just to look at it for a second. I knocked at the front door of Janet Rosso's home at dinner time when I thought it most likely she'd be at home. It swung open and I found myself under her impatient glare. You, she grumbled. I suppose I have no choice to get this over with, but we'll have to eat while we talk. Followed her in, watched as she assembled a sandwich. And then she says she's best friends. There's a picture of her on the wall. So this was the thing about how we both agreed they were probably a little more intimate, maybe. But then there they are shooting. She confirms Kathleen Harwood's a better shot. But then she says, here's her sign off. Okay, so has Mr. Went's security guard returned to work? I asked. Russo, now fuming, dropped her unfinished sandwich into the bin. I have to go. I'm expected back at the dig. I've always been a student of human nature. Reflecting on this short conversation with Janet Rosso, I find myself convinced that her anger is not born of any guilt in her own actions. Rather, she has the manner of one protecting a person she cares for. I think this is confirming that she's not hiding Kathleen. She's just cares for Kathleen and she knows she's in trouble. So I think that settles that. All right, everyone who's voted has voted for the dig. So that's it. We're going to answer the dig there. Let's look at our final questions here. Secondary questions. Okay, what was Juliet keeping from her husband? It involved the carpet. Well, remember, that was the woman that Rupert Albright blackmailed back in his old days when he worked at the carpet store. And we thought originally she may have killed someone and that was blood on the rug that she had to have replaced. Turns out it was just wine spilled while she was having an affair. So that's what Juliet was keeping. Juliet Porter was keeping a wine spilled from affair on the carpet. What was the source of the ghost stories? We know the answer to that was Kathleen Carwood planting the fake artifacts in the grounds around the cemetery and dig in the early hours of the dawn with her blonde hair high up on a ridge looking like a ghost. What new hobby had Rupert Albright taken up? And recently we know that was listening to bats. That's why he was so involved in the radio store. We heard a little bit about that today. And then how did Alice Albright die? That's his ex-wife that he widowed. We know he was a bad husband, but we know he didn't kill her. She died of tuberculosis. She died in the hospital. She had a history of asthma and stuff, and we've chased that down with her doctor in the hospital. Both confirm it was tuberculosis. It wasn't anything nefarious. All right. MES in the chat. Did we ever get a proper description of her car, though? Not really. We did have a couple witnesses near the RAF base and the butler who did see a car drive off, maybe a little silver car occupied once by a woman, but not a real description of her car. All right, so that's it. We're ready to solve it. All right, let's do it then. Oh, I wanted to point out something else before we finish. Those of you who watch the channel and have seen my live Q&As know I sometimes spend some time talking about the insanity of YouTube and why do it, why have a YouTube channel, what's to gain, what's fun, the weirdness of it. I wanted to recommend a video by this guy who does Board Games Unlocked. What's a 3,000 subscriber channel with almost 2,000 videos. And in his latest update here, I forget his name, he talks about maybe slowing down the channel, not doing it, questioning why he's doing it, but talking about some of the ups and downs. So if you're interested in that sort of meta discussion about board game channels and why do a channel, I would recommend this. He's very straightforward and honest about it, and it's interesting to watch. He also has some interesting videos as well beyond that, but that's the one I wanted to recommend. All right, let us go to our murders by mail. Anything else before I submit all our answers? I think only that question 3 is the only one that we have any real debate on. All right, so we're going to click solve here. It's hard to get me to click this because I want to kind of keep going. All right, we're going to click solve. All right, what case do we have left? We've already solved the last two, Noir and Holmes, so it's only the cozy birder that we have left. All right, here we go. Dearest Jesse, I can't thank you enough for your loyal assistance throughout the trials of this investigation. Yesterday, I sent a letter to the police laying out all of what Imogen, Vicar Dilbertson, and myself had discovered. By nightfall, the desk sergeant telephoned with the ominous news that Inspector Swift wished to interrogate us the next morning. We arrived at the station nervously, like students summoned before the headmaster. Without a word, Inspector Swift escorted us to his office and motioned for us to sit. His rumpled shirt and stubbled face suggested a long night of work, and I couldn't miss an air of frustration in his movements. Miss Cecily, said Swift, your letter hit the office rather like a grenade. I've had the lads chasing all about the county to follow up your allegations. He glared at us. I hope the 3 of you are happy with yourselves. The vicar blushed mightily. Imogen straightened up her back and smoothed the ears of little Wooster. And I summoned my courage. Not just 3, Inspector. Don't forget we had deductive help from afar, from the pen of my friend. Yes, yes. As your letter made clear enough, said Swift testily. He pulled a case file from his desk drawer and unfolded it before him. I have many questions. Let's start from the beginning, shall we? The vicar and Imogen both turned to me. I nodded and cleared my throat. Rupert Albright, I began, was not the mild-mannered birding enthusiast that he seemed. He was a nasty man, selfish and obsessive. Rupert's own choices led to his demise. Of course, this does not excuse the murderer, but it certainly makes their actions understandable. Based on everything we found, we believe that the person who shot Rupert in the eye was none other than... All right, Kathleen Carwood. Okay, now it's continued. So let's see, where did that part happen? Hit the thing like a brick, cleared my throat. Kathleen Carwood, director of the Danham Hill Archaeological Dig! Exclamation point. I paused for effect, then carried on. The motive proved simple. In the end, it was... Rupert was a blackmailer. And had to be silenced. Swift stared at me, then at his case file. Yes, well, believing something is one thing, proving it another. Imogen spoke up. It's not rocket science, Inspector. I suggest you go look at this. Now, we actually see that the questions aren't exactly what's on this sheet. In fact, it's being more specific now where we can put our knowledge to use. Because now we can say, if he needs proof, where should he go? The murderer's home. So I'm going to say, the murderer's home, we could send it to the river or to Brighton or the cave. So the murderer's home, here we go. Okay, so we didn't expect that question. I suggest you go to the murderer's home, perform a thorough search, and keep an eye out for the guilty party. Well, that seemed very clear then, that if he wants proof, he should go to her house. But then she says, keep an eye out. I mean, it's clear, right? Even though it's sort of confounding the two things. If you want to keep an eye out for her, you should go to the dig. But he wanted proof. And the place to find proof is her house, right? Proving it is another. Yeah, if he wants proof, he should go to her house. Yeah. Okay. I just don't like this last part about keep an eye out. All right. If I undo this, I'm going to say, do we have the dig as a choice? We don't even have the dig as a choice. All right, so we can relax. We don't even have the dig as a choice. Keep an eye out for the guilty party. Okay. Swift crossed his hands. Swift crossed his hands over one another. Where are we here? Your letter hit the office. Da-da-da-da. There. Okay. Keep an eye out for the guilty party. Swift crossed his hands over one another. Oh, we have the guilty party in custody, actually, and for that, I'm in your debt. In custody? I gasped. Indeed. After we got your letter, I realized that the murderer must be aware of your little investigation and may try to flee. I stationed Constable Harlan at the train station. He intercepted Kathleen Carwood, director of the Danham Hill Archaeological Dig, as she attempted to catch the 8:45 to London. On questioning, she broke down and admitted she'd shot Albright. He shook his head. Apparently, Dr. Carwood has been under enormous pressure to prove some scientific ideas at that archaeological dig of hers. Her predecessor and mentor, Professor Current Hounscliffe, found some old iron plow tips there during the war. Those plow tips were impossibly ancient, suggesting that Bockerley was one of the earliest villages in all of England to master the art of ironworking. Yes, I said, we got the impression that proving the truth of this discovery was of deadly importance in academic circles, if you'll excuse the turn of phrase. Yes, indeed, said Swift. Rupert Albright and Dr. Carwood barely knew one another, and aside from singing on the same choir at the Egglines, but it was Rupert's new hobby that caused their paths to intertwine. Oh my, yes, said the vicar. We heard all about that. He'd become obsessed with bats. He'd become obsessed about bats. This is the vicar's contribution. Inspector Swift seemed surprised. Oh, perhaps that's true as well, but it was his interest in bats that led to his demise. He'd apparently gone a bit crazy and wanted money for some electronic device that could help him listen to the furry creatures as they emerged from caves at night. Inspector Swift sighed. Rupert's nocturnal habits put him in a spot to witness something nefarious. Kathleen Carwood was so determined to prove the truth behind her plow tips that she stooped to tampering with the dig. In the middle of the night, she went out there alone and seeded the earth with faked artifacts. The vicar looked surprised. I skipped a section? What did I skip? And why is he telling us this instead of us telling him that? What did I skip? She's in custody. They intercepted her at the train station. Oh, yes, you're right. Okay. Indeed, after we got your letter, I realized the murderer must be aware of your little investigation and may try to flee. I stationed Constable Harlan at the train station. He intercepted Kathleen Carwood, director of the Danham Hill Archaeological Dig, as she attempted to catch the 8:45 to London. Upon questioning, she broke down and admitted she shot Albright. He shook his head. Apparently, Dr. Carwood has been under enormous pressure to prove some scientific ideas at the archaeological dig of hers. Her predecessor and mentor, Professor Kern Hounscliffe, found some old iron plow tips. Earliest villages. Yes, I said, we got the impression proving the truth of this discovery was of deadly importance, if you'll excuse the turn of phrase. Someone tell me if I've skipped past the part I missed, which would be unfortunate. Indeed, said Swift, Rupert Albright and Dr. Carwood barely knew each other, except they were singing at the same car, but it was Rupert's new hobby. Oh, yeah, oh my, yes, said the vicar. We heard all about that. He'd become obsessed with bats. Inspector Swift seemed surprised. Perhaps that's true as well, but it was his interest in bats that led to his demise. It's a little weird what's happening here, because he's asking us what he was involved in, and we say bats, and then he says, perhaps that's true as well, but it was interest in bats that led to his demise. That's weird. It sounds like he's trying to contradict us, but we're both saying the same thing, bats. Anyway, he says, apparently he's gone a bit crazy. He wanted money for an electronic device that could help him listen to bats. Rupert's new hobby that caused their past. Maybe they're saying his new hobby was blackmail? Did I skip over it? Were the choices... Because it doesn't look like it wants me to go back. But were the choices other than bats blackmail, and did it want us to say blackmail? I don't know. That's weird. But he certainly has become involved in bats. It does sound like he misheard us or something. Okay, Inspector Swift seemed... When we say bats, he says, Inspector Swift seemed surprised. Perhaps that's true as well. But it was interest in bats. I don't get it. All right. A little bit weird answer here then. All right. So continuing along then, Inspector Swift sighed. Rupert's nocturnal habits put him in a spot to witness something nefarious. Kathleen Carwood was so determined to prove the truth behind her plow tips that she stooped to tampering with the dig. In the middle of the night, she went out there alone and seeded the earth with faked artifacts. The vicar looked surprised. Why does he look surprised? We already knew this. It feels like the game didn't understand our answers. The vicar looked surprised. Did she admit to this, he asked. Swift consulted his notes. Indeed, she did. Albright was at a cave above the dig that night, listening to his bats. I don't understand why he's telling us this. Why aren't we telling him this? Saw Kathleen's flashlight amid the stones. If I remember correctly, we will be able to back up and re-answer these questions. So we'll see if something wrong. Okay. He was listening to bats. He saw Kathleen's flashlight amid the stones and witnessed her crime. Next day, he approached her after choir practice and suggested she buy him a tea so they could talk. Imogen rubbed Wooster's neck and got a thoughtful look on her face. You know, there was a story in the newspaper about some pre-dawn dog walkers who saw a ghost in Morden Cemetery. It seems likely that the ghost was Kathleen Carwood. That's our answer, okay? The ghost was Kathleen Carwood. And her flashlight skulking around the Squire stones. He says, that could very well be, said Swift. In any case, Albright demanded that Kathleen give him money, or he'd reveal what she'd done. She didn't have enough cash, but she did have access to the Danham Hill Museum and all of its valuable artifacts. She stole a pot and gave it to Albright. He auctioned it off anonymously and used the proceeds to fund the next stage of his bat-listening obsession. The man was a blackmailer, pure and simple. Oh, several people told us Rupert was less than virtuous, I said. Was one of them named Juliet Sierra? He asked. We knew she was hiding something from her late husband. And then it sounds like it's asking, what was she hiding? All right, well, we know the answer to that. She'd been blackmailed by Rupert. She was having an affair with Rupert. She was Rupert's accomplice, or I don't know. Okay, well, we know she'd been blackmailed by Rupert. In fact, we know more than that. We know exactly what she was being blackmailed about. But we know for sure she was being blackmailed by Rupert. So he asks us, do you know what it was about? And we say, yeah, we interviewed Juliet years ago. Oh, no, he's saying, we knew she was hiding something from her late husband. And then someone says, yes, we interviewed Juliet years ago. She'd also been blackmailed by Rupert. Years ago, I don't know who's talking. Is it him continuing? It seems so. Okay. Swift made a note. So Kathleen Carwood wasn't his first victim. Back during the war, I explained, while Albright was working at the local carpet store, he became aware that Juliet Sierra Porter was having an affair, and he blackmailed her under threat of telling her husband. Juliet was an early victim. It seems Kathleen was his last. The inspector returned to his file. Dr. Carwood's trouble with Albright wasn't over after she gave him that pot, for he decided he wanted more. He dropped a note to her demanding she steal a second item from the museum and deliver it to him in Borley Wood. Kathleen had had enough. Her career was on the precipice. She saw before her a life of endless extortion from the unattractive man. So instead of a stolen artifact, she brought her pistol. Kathleen had practiced much on the gun range behind the dig. She was an expert shot. He continued, Albright wasn't stupid. He feared she'd bring the police, so he waited in the bushes with his field glasses and watched. But she spied him there and pulled the trigger. As we know, Rupert Albright died instantly. For the most part, he died unloved. With the exception of his mother, I said sadly, and possibly his late wife. How did Rupert's wife die? Okay, so we know the answer is tuberculosis. With the exception of his mother, I said sadly, and possibly his late wife. She died far too young of tuberculosis. I don't think she was sad to miss him, but okay. Well, in any case, said Swift, it's all over now. I'll be charging Dr. Carwood with murder. Some of your leads will no doubt contribute to the evidence. He pushed back from his desk and gave us a stern look. Well, now comes the point where I both thank you and reprimand you. Your efforts have helped, there's no doubt, but the next time there's a murder in Bockerley, I'd ask that you leave the investigating to the professionals. Oh, come now, Inspector, I said. What are the chances there would be another murder in Bockerley? Well, with the three of you keeping an eye out, I have the feeling it's more likely than not. All right, a little tease about a future case. There seem to be a few hiccups in this ending section. I really like the way it's structured, where it's in the middle of a dialogue back and forth and our answers shape it. But it did seem a bit buggy there. And no mention of Went's death, too. That's weird. All right, let's click finish. I think we're going to be able to rerun through this and experiment and see. But let's click finish and see how it decides to score us. Dear Jesse, it says, you did it. You completed the case with flying colors. You scored 200 points out of a possible 200. Your patience and effort have been awesome. Thank you so much for trying the game. We hope you liked it. We will follow up shortly with a survey to get your thoughts on how we can improve and tell you ways you could try another mystery or share them with others. If you have any other immediate ideas, please fill out this survey. Jason and Jeff and Scott. Okay. Jason is the person that I have corresponded with by email to get early access to the PDF if we haven't gotten it in the mail, and to talk about the Went issue. I don't know who Jeff and Scott are. Okay, so it clearly knows we got the right answers, even though the dialogue was a little wonky. Maybe it's set up that way so that no matter what you say, you get the same dialogue. Let's take a look here. Rob says, strange omission. There were no mention of second murder. Nicholas says, poor Went. Nobody mentioned his death. Debbie says, so we got everything correct, but the text didn't always reflect that. It was weird that Inspector Swift was basically explaining the case to us when really we should be explaining it to him. The most interesting thing was the fact that they caught her at the train station. She almost got away. I wonder if we had somehow gone to the Bockerley train station, if we wouldn't have seen her there. I'm very curious, like if we had a choice to go back in time and go someplace, it would be curious to go to the train station, but the police were basically saying that they caught her, so it's not like we were going to catch her anyway. Let's see. If we try to go back, will it let us answer it again? So it will let us answer things again. And if you're curious what happens if you put wrong answers, let's see. The one who shot him in the eye, if we say something wrong, let's say we say it was Grossler, the poacher. Let's see what it says. We say the person who shot him in the eye was Grossler. Let's see what he says. I paused for effect and carried on. The motive proved simple. All right, we're going to choose all the wrong answers here. He killed him for stealing the inheritance. Motive proved simple. Murder reason that Rupert got Alice Albright's inheritance when she passed. Swift stared at me and then at his case files. He says, yes, well, believing something is one thing, proving it another. Okay, so the answers from the detective are the same no matter what we say. Let's see. Imogen says, it's not rocket science. If you want proof, where should you go? All right, let's have them go to the river near the murder. She says, go to the riverside, keep an eye out for the guilty party. Swift crossed his hands over one another. Well, we had the guilty party in custody, thank you very much. But he says you were wrong. Okay, so it is changing now. He says, you were wrong. The bad news is you were wrong about the killer. Wrong, I gasped. Indeed, after we got your letter, I realized that the murderer must be aware of your little investigation and may try to flee. He tells us about capturing Carwood. And then it goes on. They barely knew each other. He'd become obsessed with... All right, we're going to say now he's obsessed with auctions. He became obsessed with auctions. Inspector Swift seemed surprised. Perhaps that's true as well, but it was his interest in bats. Okay, so that paragraph is meant to go with no matter what you say. That's worded poorly. but okay. The vicar looks surprised. Did he admit to this? Which we already know. Okay, we saying the ghost was the ancient souls from the dig, we're going to say. Okay, it seems likely that the ghost was an ancient soul from the dig, disturbed by all this activity. Let's see what he says to that. He says, well, that could very well be. That's the generic answer he gives. Okay. And she was hiding something from her husband. We're going to say she was Rupert's accomplice. Then he says, very interesting. We'll have to follow that up. Okay, generic answers. He returned to his file. Albright wasn't stupid. Accepting of his mother. How did his wife die? We're going to say it was poison. Though it was never proved. He says, well, in any case, it's all over now. We'll be charging Dr. Carwood for murder. He pushed back from his desk. What are the chances there'd be another murder? He says, well, with you guys, more likely than not. And then if you finish it, says, you did it. You completed the case with flying colors. Scored 0 points. Your patience and effort have been awesome. Okay, a little weird. So I'm going to just quickly put in the right answers just in case, so that we get the follow-up email, the follow-up mail correct, if it makes a difference, which I don't think it is. Let me just fill in these right answers. You become obsessed with bats. It was Kathleen Carwood planting stuff. She was hiding that she'd been blackmailed. It's not really what she was hiding, though, was it? Tuberculosis. All right. All right, let's talk about this for a little bit. So it's clear that the structure of the end game is designed so that no matter what you say, it just runs on rails, with an exception of maybe one sentence. I think, for 4 months of play, it was a fun scene, but it's odd to me that they didn't try to make that experience better. Because they're using an app, a back-end thing to do this work, it's a little weird. It's strange that they didn't take advantage of that to have it respond differently based on what you said. It was fun that this last question was phrased differently here, but then very confusing to us that some of the responses from him seem to be contradicting what we said. And now we know why, because it's just a generic response no matter what we said. That was confusing, disappointing, and it's a missed opportunity. This is what I said in my previous review of the previous 2 cases, that as enjoyable as the experience was, and it really was, I would recommend it, it feels like this is a story of missed opportunities. And there was an opportunity where 4 months, it's all about narrative. The reward we're looking for at the end is not our score, but sort of a narrative reward. And it would have been fun if we could explain to the inspector what we figured out and him being impressed by us. That would feel satisfying. And it was a little of a letdown here, a little anticlimactic, that we get called into this office, and instead of being able to have the satisfaction of giving him the solution that we've worked hard on, he basically gives it to us. And that was disappointing. Not only does he give it to us, but the few questions he asks us, he misunderstands and talks as if we didn't figure it out. Strange. A strange ending. And I will say that once again, The case promises, if we look at the rules, which we haven't looked at since the beginning, but all three cases promise this. Always remember, the killer is actively trying to thwart your investigation. Your choices can affect the outcome for the characters surrounding the case with legal, romantic, or even mortal consequences. Okay, everything we've seen from now 3 cases over the series of many months never used that. That never came into play. Nothing ever was affected in any way that we can see by our choices. No one was ever getting away. The answer is always going to be the same, no matter how many months, as far as we can tell. So a little bit of a false promise there. Emmy says, was this released before the other 2 cases? I don't think so. So this was kickstarted. I believe this system was kickstarted. And I don't know which cases came first. It's a good question. I'm not sure. We actually could try to find out here. We could look at Murders by Mail Kickstarter. So here was the original Kickstarter. So let's see. Murders by Mail describes it. And they're advertising the noir one. We've talked about it a little bit differently. So for $60, you choose either Los Angeles Noir or the Cozy Mystery. So it seems like these 2 were their first ones, and then Sherlock Holmes came next. Ever since we began testing Murders by Mail over a year ago, so at this point when they were kickstarting the film noir and the Cozy Birder, it was a year old, but I don't think the Sherlock Holmes one existed yet. So I think the Sherlock Holmes one must have been the new one. That's what it seems like to me. And when was this? 2020. New case file has just gone live. The Fellowship of the Bones. Okay, so this ended 2020, and then at some point they started a new Kickstarter for Fellowship of Bones, it looks like. So here was the new one. Fellowship of Bones. And our existing cases, Blinded Birder, Boom of Hollywood. Okay, so Fellowship of Bones was the 3rd one. So Blinded Birder may have been the first or second. Okay, let's see. The vicar being attacked in the second murder almost fit that description of what could happen, which is why I thought Kathleen might have gone into hiding. It's true, but I don't think those were ever not going to happen that way. I think whoever we sent there was going to get hit on the head. But it's a great question, and it's something we are going to follow up on. So we've got at least 2 other people playing this case. As long as they send someone other than the vicar to Went's house, we're going to find out whether anything could have changed. It's clear, though, that at the end of the case, something different could have happened. Also, let me explain why I don't think there's a chance in hell that Went might not have been attacked. We visited the library where we heard about Went. Sorry, we visited the Danham Hill Dig Visitor Center where we heard about Went, and we sent someone immediately out to Went's house, and he was dead by that time. I believe that's right. So I don't think there was any way to get to Went sooner. We are told that Imogen is a fast driver, so it's conceivable that if we sent Imogen, she would get there first, but I don't think so. I think we sent someone to Went's house right after we heard about her, right after we heard about him. That's my memory. Let me see. When did the vicar get hit over the head? What letter? It was fairly early in the case. So here he is. He got hit over the head in letter 7 when we sent him to Went's house. And let's see when we went to the dig site. Yep, letter 6. So letter 6, the vicar is asking about the security guard. She tells us, we send him immediately. He leaves the dig site and goes to Went's house and gets hit on the head by the shovel woman who follows him. So it makes complete sense that there was no way you weren't going to get hit on the head. Oh, I wonder. It's possible no one could ever trigger. Actually, something just occurred to me. So I may be misspeaking a little bit. I think maybe I see something that we should have thought of, and maybe why we didn't find out about Went. Can anyone guess what I'm going to say? I don't think there's any way to stop the person who tries to go to Went's house from getting hit on the back of the head. But now that I think about it, I wonder if... And Tina says, didn't we go first to the pond? No, we did go to the pond afterwards, though, I believe. No, after we got killed, hit on the head, we went to the pond. But I wonder if... Okay, so look. Well, it does say we tried to send him to C-53 to meet Mr. Went, right? And he doesn't remember this got happened. Now, we know you're not allowed to go to the same place twice. But I wonder if after he got hit, if we couldn't send someone to his house again. In other words, having not ever gotten there, I wonder if that was an exception to the rule that you could go there again. We just assumed the rules of the game are you can't go to the same place twice. But I wonder if the game didn't mean for us to be able to say, well, we didn't get there, let's try again. And I wonder if that might have been where we would meet the brother or find the police and find that he's found his body. That's an interesting idea. I'd be very curious to hear about that. If I can find someone who's played the game before they solve it, if they've only tried going to his house once and got hit on the head, I'll ask them to go back. Okay. All that aside, and I will make. Oh boy, we gotta end this so that we can play Dear Holmes afterwards. I'm willing to sit and chat more about this later, but I will say this: it's the journey that's the most important thing. And here we've had 4 months, 18 turns, a lot of fun out of this, a lot of fun discussing things, a lot of fun being in this world, spending time with these three people of this club. I really enjoyed it. I'm sad to see it end. I would, in a heartbeat, fund a Kickstarter for another play-by-mail game from this company. I'd love to see them work on a couple of the things we've pointed out, but it has really been a blast. It's been fun sharing the time with all of you. Happy to talk about it more on the comments of this video. Love to hear your thoughts on the game, on the system, on where you would rank the 3 of these. I think for me, it's this one at the top, then the Noir, then the Sherlock Holmes. It's been a real pleasure. I'm going to sign off here, but I'll see you all in 8 minutes on the Dear Holmes episode. We'll talk about it more. We'll talk in the comments of this video and at the Board Game Geek. Let me know. I really would love to hear your longer thoughts on the experience, on the genre, on the mechanics, what they could do better, any suggestions, what you thought of the overall experience, the pacing, whether you would have liked to have a longer case, a bigger case, more case in this world. Maybe you have an idea for a different setting for one of these play-by-mail cases. I'll see you all next time.